a 10-year-old girl wearing her white patent leather shoes, her little flower embroidered gloves. She's about to have her moment in the spotlight and sing This Little Light of Mine, and then boom, an explosion. We're talking about Birmingham 1963 and the powerful work of Carole Boston Weatherford. That's coming up next on Books Alive. And thank you so much for joining us today on Books Alive. I am really honored to tell you who I have in the studio with me today. It is the very wonderful Carole Boston Weatherford. Welcome to Books Alive.
Thanks, Barb.
It's just really great to have you here. Now, if I'm giving you a name that you haven't heard before, get your pen and paper right now, because you're going to want to write these books down, and you're going to want to come into the library or the bookstore and get them. They are just very powerful, inspirational, but interesting and informative books. And she's got, how many did you tell me? 30?
About 37, 38. I've lost count, actually.
All right, so you're probably saying, who is this woman? Where did she come from? Well, we can claim you, can't we?
You can. I'm from Maryland. I was born in Baltimore and raised in Baltimore. Came through the Baltimore City Public Schools, where my parents were both educators. Grew up in a family of 4 and had extended family living with me because my grandmother lived with us. We always had a grandmother in the house.
Wow.
And so we had stories, that were told, came down through the oral tradition, both through my grandmothers and my parents. And I became aware of my roots on a farm on Maryland's Eastern Shore. So my childhood was kind of steeped in history.
Yeah, wow. Oh, so that's where you got it. Now, I've read that you would write your poems on little cards?
Well, almost.
Okay.
I made up my first poem in first grade and recited it to my mother when she was driving me home from school. She was so surprised that she parked the car and asked me if I could say it again, and she wrote it down. After she realized that it wasn't a fluke when I made up additional poems, she asked my father, who was at the time a high school printing teacher, if he would print some of my early poems on what really amounted to index cards. So my poems were a couple times typesetting exercises for my father's students at Douglas High School.
What a mirror, though, Carole. My gosh, your parents gave you to let you know right off the bat how miraculous this was and how phenomenal.
I know, isn't that amazing? They had such vision, I think, to have recognized my talent and to have nurtured it and to let me know it was special. But oddly enough, I didn't aspire to be a writer growing up. It was just kind of something I could do. It was a hobby. I wanted to be a librarian or a fashion designer.
Well, I can see the two. Yeah, right.
Definitely.
Because we are very fashionable people, we librarians. Yeah, right. Well, it is creative stuff, though. All right, and you are now a professor.
I'm a professor at Fayetteville State University in North Carolina, where I've been living for 25 years. I live in High Point, North Carolina.
High Point, okay.
I teach English, courses in children's and adolescent literature, and then some professional writing and creative writing courses.
Oh, wow. All right, how did you learn to write?
Developmentally, really. I took classes just like everybody else in school, the writing bug definitely bit me at a very young age, but things didn't really click for me as a writer, when to the point where I could read something on my own and say, wow, that's really good, until I was out of college. So that's kind of a pet peeve that I have about testing kids on for writing at such a young age, because I think it's really a developmental skill that maybe develops, like the synapses in the brain, the circuitry has to be there to do it.
Yeah.
To be able to sit right down and write.
Right.
And mine are, mine are firing now. They weren't firing as, they weren't firing quite as well when I was a child.
Yeah. All right. I guess I shouldn't say how old were you. What year was your first book published?
My first book was published in 1995, and that was
Okay.
Juneteenth Jamboree.
Oh, okay. Wow. So you were doing a historical one to begin with.
Right, right.
All right.
And I've continued in that vein.
Absolutely.
I like to say that I mine the past for family stories, fading traditions, and forgotten struggles.
Now, you were talking about your writing process. I'm just curious, and for kids who are watching who, are always wondering, how do you do this thing, this writing thing? Do you write every day?
I would like to. And I do write every day, but it's not always something I want to write. Sometimes it's, feedback to a student about a paper they've written, or an email to a school about an upcoming school visit. But, when I'm at my happiest, I'm writing every day because that's when I have time to write. So that makes me, to write what I want to write, that makes me happy.
All right.
So
do
I
you
do
channel
enjoy.
stuff, do you think? Like, Paul McCartney talks about the songs just appearing.
That sometimes that happens, but that usually the process is not magical. It's not automatic. It's sitting down, knowing what the topic is and forcing myself to write. I channeled Billie Holiday.
Ooh.
I think I may have channeled
Let me get Billie
Harriet
up here.
Moses a
Okay.
bit.
This is the book she's talking about, Becoming Billie Holiday, which you wrote in, is this free verse?
Free verse,
Okay.
97 free verse poems
Wow.
written in Billie Holiday's voice, titled after her songs and spanning her first 25 years. So let me go back to the 97 poems written in a period of 6 weeks. So I channeled that, and but I didn't know I channeled it. I had a roommate say, "I know you channeled that."
Oh,
I said,
man.
I think I must have.
That's cool. All right, let's see. How about I'm Painting the Town Red? Would you read that for us?
Sure.
Okay, cool.
I'm painting the town red. I was a moth, and the fast life a flame. Evenings found me at house parties, small clubs, and speakeasies, sipping white lightning and smoking weed with night owls who didn't suspect my age. One night, I sang a blues I'd learned while listening to Victrolas. My chirping hushed the chatter, and the night crowd clapped for more. With a half-dozen songs, I made the rounds at Club Paradise, Buddy Love's, Miss Ella's, and Pop Major's, and was a regular at Ethel Moore's Good Time House. She was like a big sister to me, and piano players like brothers. In shady after-hours spots, I found a voice to grow into and someplace to belong.
Wow.
And this was my young adult debut.
Yes.
Yeah,
We have
definitely
this in
young adult material,
yes,
right?
Yes. What draws you to her?
Billie Holiday is my muse, and I think she was my muse long before I realized it. I had written poems. I write adult poetry as well, so I had written adult poems about her. She had made cameos in adult poems, and oddly enough, she even made a cameo in my book Jazz Baby. Not through the words, but through the illustrations. And I was in a period where I was trying to think about what am I going to write about next, and I thought, well, I'd like to age up a bit, write for young adults. And I'd like to say that Billie Holiday herself enlisted me to write the book. But I was resistant to the idea. I was afraid that it wouldn't sell. So I was at the Great Blacks in Wax Museum in Baltimore and wandered up to the 3rd floor and stood at Billie Holiday's wax figure. And a teenage girl walked up. She appeared to be a teenage girl, and she said, "Ooh, Billie Holiday." And I looked her up and down. I wanted to ask her age, but you just don't do that, not even to a teenage woman. So I didn't ask her age, but I said, "What grade are you in?" And she said, "I'm in 8th grade." And I said, "And you know who Billie Holiday is?" And she said, "Yeah, she could really sing." And the girl walked away from the exhibit, and I just looked at the wax figure, and it was almost as if the wax figure said, "See, I told you you need to write my book." So I did.
So you heeded the call.
I heeded the call. I couldn't worm my way out of it.
I had the Lady Sings the Blues album when I was probably a teen. Yeah, so I could hear her voice when I was reading that.
Well, thank you. That's that's a high compliment. Then.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into some of this good stuff over here. Freedom on the Menu, the Greensboro Sit-ins. And this is such a powerful story about a little girl that it could be any little girl that loves to go downtown with her mother and goes to the mall with her mother, but she can't have a banana split like those other people can.
Right. The story is set in 1960 in Greensboro, North Carolina, and it's based on the true story of the Greensboro sit-ins that were sparked by an act of civil disobedience taken by 4 young men at North Carolina A&T College, now known as North Carolina A&T University. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to write about that event, but I had to find a protagonist that young people could identify with, mm-hmm. and also I had to find a motivation for the main character that young people could identify with. So I couldn't say, you know, well, she wants equality, because kids didn't walk around back then saying, I want equality. But they might, you know, if they were downtown with their parents, black or white, they'd say, I want a treat at the soda fountain. I want a banana split. Uh-huh. So in that book, the banana split is for Connie symbolizes equality. Mm. And so by the end of the story, she does, you know, she mm-hmm. gets to have it because of the action of the Greensboro 4.
I thought it was really interesting, and I did not realize that where the college kids began a lot of those sit-ins, when they went back to school, the high school kids kicked in and took it on.
Right, right. And they did that. The reason students were involved was because they had less to lose than adults. If adults had, you know, had led the sit-ins, mm-hmm. they could have lost their jobs. They could have been evicted from apartments. Mm-hmm. Their mortgages could have been called in all at once. There could have been a lot of repercussions. Mm-hmm. So the students led the effort, and it was a very, very heroic effort that took place 50 years ago this year, 1960 in Greensboro.
July 25th, 1960.
Right, it's when the lunch counters integrated, and yes. the Woolworth store is now the International Civil Rights Museum.
Is it really?
Yes.
Oh wow! Oh, that's really great. Well, this is like a great, you know, little window into history, and I think anybody reading it could connect to the personal feeling for it. It's like, you know, they say up close and personal with, and I just think that it would make a great read aloud in any classroom.
And I also have made a reader's theater available of the book through I think it's available through Penguin's website.
Okay.
Teacher Resources website.
Yeah.
So several schools have performed the reader's theater, and it's really a powerful experience for the kids.
Oh yeah, that's really great. Okay, let's pick up Moses here. She's somebody else who talks to us here beyond Miss Billy. This one was a Caldecott Honor and a Coretta Scott King Illustrator winner. Is that,
right.
If I got that
correct,
right, Carole?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Why did you decide to write about Harriet?
Well, Harriet Tubman is one of my heroes. Like all Maryland school kids, I was introduced to her in elementary school, not in person. I don't want anybody to think I was alive back then. But, I learned about her in elementary school. And
did you connect to her?
I guess I must have, because I had written about her. I often write about a subject more than once, so I had written about Billie Holiday, as I said, several times. Mm-hmm. I had an adult poem. It's a poem. It started out as an adult poem. I have another poem in a collection about Harriet Tubman. And I wanted to write about her spiritual journey, and that's what I did in Moses.
Yes, yes. Okay, now we've got to have you read some of this, Carole.
And the story unfolds through a series of conversations that Harriet says that she had with God. She believed that she could speak to God as friend to friend. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
And it's illustrated by Kadir Nelson, who's just fabulous.
He did an amazing job. I was trying to find the part where she's in the potato hole.
That's it.
Here we go.
Up ahead, she hears word that patrollers are nabbing runaways and crouches for days in a potato hole. Dreams she is buried alive. Have you deserted me, Lord? Harriet, when you were a girl, you hid in a pig pen to shun the whip. You fought hogs for table scraps. almost starved before you faced the lash. I am with you now as I was then. An old prayer comes back to her. Lord, make me strong. Help me fight.
Oh.
So the story unfolds through these three voices, the narrator's voice, Harriet's voice, and God's voice.
Now, how did you imagine her? I mean, did you do research where you could find her writings, or how did you get her?
There is, I guess you would call it a slave narrative or an autobiography of Harriet Tubman that was written in 1868. She dictated it to, I think, Sarah Hopkins. So in that autobiography, I know it is stated what Harriet said to God. So the things that she said to God are, you know, right out of her autobiography. The things that he said to her, I had to imagine.
Okay.
So it did involve some research and some imagination.
Well, as I read this, I thought, you know, our kids need to know that people who do important things, whose names live on, they have incredibly huge challenges, and this is like how you stick it out. This is how you have the determination and the courage to go through a journey like that. And maybe their lives will be the same kind of journey, maybe not as intense, but everybody's going to have some challenges like that. And what a great partnership.
Right, right. And she was, you know, she was really an unlikely person to have done what she did, because she was, first of all, she was a slave. She was a woman. She was not a big woman. She was small. She suffered from what now would have been called epilepsy.
Wow.
And she could neither read nor write.
Oh, my goodness.
So, I mean, she had to have somebody helping her.
Yes.
Somebody watching out for her.
All right, we're going to take a short break. But when we come back, we're going to be talking about this book, which I told you had called to me for a while. This is Dear Mr. Rosenwald. And this is a story about a man who was the president of Sears and Roebuck, who did an amazing philanthropic thing back in the 20s and 30s. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This can't be happening.
This can't be happening.
Of course it's not happening. Armored car.
Listen, having money isn't about luck. Make your own coffee, save $1,000 a year. Feed me. Feed the pig.
Any questions?
No.
You know.
We're not magicians, we can't read your mind.
We need your questions, each and every kind. Will this react with my other medicine?
Hey, what are all these tests even for? Questions are the answer.
If you're just joining us, I'm in the studio today with the very wonderful Carole Boston Weatherford. And we've been talking about her books, which are historical, biographical, and inspirational. And this one is really cool. This is a story I had never heard of. All right, Dear Mr. Rosenwald, can you explain to people who he was?
Julius Rosenwald was the president of Sears in the early part of the 20th century. And he was also a philanthropist who served on the board of Tuskegee Institute and had access to Booker T. Washington.
Ah, all right. And he read Up from Slavery, Booker T. Washington's
He read Up from Slavery,
book.
And he asked Booker T. Washington what he thought that Rosenwald could do to help in the South. And Booker T., who was a big advocate of literacy, said, "Well, you can create a fund to build schools in rural areas." So Julius Rosenwald's fund, known as the Rosenwald Fund, built more than 5,000 schools in rural areas throughout the South, some of which were in Maryland, and one of which is restored in Maryland, in PG County.
Okay, okay.
So more than 5,000 schools were built. Seed grants were provided by the fund. The communities provided additional matching funds, really, that exceeded the seed grants, and provided the labor and the land to build the schools.
I thought that what he did to maintain self-respect and dignity in the communities by saying, okay, you fundraise and I will also contribute, you know, so it was like a partnering on that.
And the seed grants really averaged about $600. So they were, you know, really tiny grants, and most of the schools were built in the 1920s.
Wow. And I read that, probably in your notes, that in 1937 when they, or no, 1934, when they went around and did a report on the schools, it was his schools that were standing and not just crumbling and leaking and
right. Architects
falling
from
down.
Tuskegee Institute designed the schools.
Ah.
There were two-room schools, and some were, you know, larger schools, two-story.
I just think
they
that's
were
such a
small.
great story because it's about, the little girl says tomorrow is in our hands.
Right.
And it's really about, you know, yes, everybody is strong, everybody come together, look what we can do.
Right. It's about the strength of community and the value that the sharecropping community placed on education at a time when there were few educational opportunities for blacks.
Wow. All right, we're going to jump here a little bit. Let's do Jessie because, you know, I was thinking about the kids who were born in 1960 or before, as we probably were, and our sense of history. And then the ones who were born in 2000 and what they know and what their world looks like today. And people like Jesse Owens and what he did and what he contributed, you know, they don't quite get it. But I didn't realize he was sickly.
Yeah, as a child he was.
Yeah.
He was. He had, you know, a few strikes against him as a child.
And then the 1936 Olympics come along.
Right. He had already proven himself as an athlete, a college athlete at Ohio State University, I believe, and he went to the Olympics, and where Hitler, that was when Nazism was on the rise. It was before World War II, but Hitler really wanted to showcase, you know, Aryan might at these Olympics, and here comes Jesse Owens, you know, winning 4 gold medals, and that just kind of, you know, just dashed Hitler's whole, you know, whole goal.
Kind of blew that theory.
Right, kind of blew that theory, right.
This is the scene where our Olympic team is walking in, and Hitler's waiting for everybody to kind of bow their flag to him, and we do not.
No, the United States delegation did not bow the flag to Hitler.
And this is pretty cool. How did you learn about this moment here where these Luz Long? Is that
Luz
how,
Long,
yeah.
right. Jesse Owens and Luz Long struck up this friendship, and Luz Long, they were competing against each other in the broad jump. Luz Long was German, and he gave some advice to Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens was about to foul out because he was kind of missing the mark when he started his jump.
Right.
So Luz gave him some advice. Jesse ended up winning the gold medal, but the two became friends. Sadly, Luz died during World War II.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but they became friends.
And Jesse came back to a ticker tape parade, but no big contracts.
No big contracts. He was, after all, a black athlete. It was 1936. And it's really kind of sad. He ended up going around the country, sometimes racing racehorses. You know, he just, it was
He
really
would
sad.
run and the horse would run.
The horse would run. He, you know, he did those kinds of things to make money.
In the same vein, we have this fellow, Wendell Scott, who was, he got his own Model T when he was, what, 15?
Right. He
And
was a teenager.
And he loved to drive
He
fast.
loved to drive fast. He was a driver for bootleggers, so he drove bootleg whiskey. That's how he got his start driving fast. Well, he also drove a cab before that. And he was essentially the Jackie Robinson of stock car racing in the United States.
Yeah.
He is to this day the only black person ever to have won a NASCAR. It wasn't called NASCAR back then, but a stock car championship.
Well, to me, he had a checkered past, if I can dare say that.
Right, he did.
And but it was kind of cool because he, you know, he liked to drive fast, but he got a lot of speeding tickets. But he, you know, he quit school to drive the cab to put his sister through college, which is pretty nice.
Right.
Then he goes off to war. When he comes back, you know, they won't let him drive the cab anymore because he has too many speeding tickets.
Exactly.
But
so at that point, he opened a garage, and it so happened that there was a racetrack promoter who wanted, you know, some gimmick to get people onto his track, and he said, "I'll get a black driver."
Yeah.
So he asked the police who's the fastest black driver, and they had all these tickets that Wendell Scott had piled up, and they said, "He's your man."
What a doorway. Now, in 1963, when he goes to Jacksonville, Florida, and wins the race,
there is he's waiting. He's ready for his victory lap, waiting to hear his name called. But his name was not called. Another driver's name was called, and the reason the other driver was declared the winner was because the promoters didn't want the beauty queen that usually kisses the race car driver to kiss a black man
and get the trophy.
So he didn't even get the trophy that he deserved for the race that he won. But he did win that race, and it's in the record books now.
Let us hope we are in a better place today.
I think we are.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Before John was a jazz giant, the Song of John Coltrane.
That's actually my shortest book. I think it's about 100 some words.
Wow.
Maybe 160 words. And it's essentially a riff on John Coltrane's childhood growing up in my adopted hometown of High Point, North Carolina. He grew up there. And I imagined the sounds that he must have heard growing up in High Point and how those sounds might have influenced his later musical development. So the refrain is, before John was a jazz giant.
Yes.
And I talk about the sounds that he heard.
But you said, and breathed every sound he'd ever known into a bold new song.
Right.
And I think your note said for every child to listen to the sounds in his or her world and, you know, become aware and make that part of your song.
Right. And what this book, like some of my other books, it really tries to convey the message to kids that the seed of who you are to become is within you already. And of course, you know, your teachers, your parents, everybody, your community is watering that seed, nurturing that seed in hopes that you can blossom into whatever it is you want to become. And it is possible.
T.A. Barron, when he was here, he has 5 kids, and I asked him how he and his wife had, you know, helped each one of them be an individual, and he said, you know, you have to listen. You have to listen with your heart to who they really are, and then you mirror that back. So when you were talking about your parents, your mom pulling the car over to capture that poem, I thought, wow.
Right. In fact, I have a son I have a son and a daughter. My husband and I should say, have a son and a daughter. And our son, for years, was doodling in class and was not, you know, like forgetting to write down his homework. And I'd say, you need to stop that doodling and listen to the teacher. And then around when he was in 6th grade, I started looking at the doodles that he had in his notebook, and I said, he's an artist. So now he and I are collaborating on some book projects that we hope we'll be able to sell. He's still in college, but you know, he's an artist.
You saw it.
Right, I saw it.
Good for you. All right, now this one's my favorite of them all. And I just love this book, Birmingham, 1963. Would you read for us, Carole?
Sure.
Okay. And the photographs that are in this are just perfection.
This has a fictional narrator who is about to turn 10, as you'll see. The year I turned 10, I missed school to march with other children for a seat at whites-only lunch counters. Like a junior choir, we chanted, "We shall overcome." Then police loosed snarling dogs and fire hoses on us, and buses carted us 900 strong to jail.
That's those children.
The year I turned 10, Mama, Daddy, and I stood at Lincoln's feet, while King's dream woke the nation from a long night of wrongs. Some evenings I dozed on Mama's shoulder during mass meetings at church. The grown-ups were making big plans. The day I turned 10, I rehearsed my Youth Day solo in the full-length mirror. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. My little brother sopped red-eye gravy with biscuits and yanked my pigtails like always, poking out his tongue when I tattled. But Mama allowed me my first sip of coffee, and Daddy twirled me around the kitchen in my patent leather cha-cha heels. Then our whole family piled into the car that Daddy had washed and waxed the day before. We listened to gospel radio as we rode downtown. The day I turned 10, our church was quiet. No meetings, no marches. Mama left me in Sunday school with a soft kiss and coins for the offering plate. The teacher read a psalm, told a Bible story, and led a favorite hymn. Jesus loves the little children. I could hardly wait for church service to begin, to stand in the pulpit and sing from my heart. I wiped my clammy palms and took a deep breath. As I waited, 4 big girls giggled on their way to the restroom. I would have tagged along if I thought they'd include me. The day I turned 10, someone tucked a bundle of dynamite under the church steps, then lit the fuse of hate. Seconds later, a blast rocked the church. Smoke clogged my throat, stung my eyes as I crawled past crumbled plaster, broken glass, shredded Bibles, and wrecked chairs, yelling, "Mama! Daddy!" Scared church folk ran every which way to get out. That bomb left 21 hurt and those 4 girls, Cynthia, Denise, Carol, and Addie Mae, dead. "This is my sister," a boy cried. My God! 10:22 a.m., the clock stopped, and Jesus' face was blown out of the only stained glass window left standing, the one where he stands at the door. "The Lord is my shepherd," the pastor said on a megaphone. The day I turned 10, I saw blood spilled on holy ground, and my daddy cry for the very first time. What had those girls done to deserve this? At supper, no one had much appetite. Afterwards, Mama washed dishes and I dried, while she hummed, "Nobody knows the trouble I seen." By evening, stonings, shootings, and fires broke out. "Keep your children inside," the police warned. I wondered if I could ever play outside again. I prayed myself to sleep that night. Please protect my family, Lord. God give 4 angels wings. The day I turned 10, there was no birthday cake with candles, just cinders, ash, and a wish I were still 9. And the book concludes with a tribute poem to each of the 4 girls that died that day.
And I just loved that you put their pictures, each girl's picture is in here, so that it's like they'll live forever.
Right. Well, I believe in documenting history.
Yes.
And I love I have loved all the illustrators that I've worked with. They've been fabulous illustrators, but I also love having my books illustrated with photography, because when I share a book like the Greensboro Sit-ins and tell kids that this is based on history, it doesn't matter. They still raise their hands and say, "Did that really happen?"
Yes.
But when you use a photograph to illustrate something, there's no denying that it happened.
It's like living proof.
Right, right.
All right, well, that is, to me, you brought us into it from a girl's eye view. And, you know, that the 4 girls walking by, and she might have gone with them if she thought she'd be included. I mean, every feeling is such a human connection. And then, and that's just, you feel it, you experience it. I just think that is amazing. All right, we're going to run out of time, so I'm going to grab 2 friends of ours, Oprah and President Obama. Let's start with Miss Oprah. Now, she didn't always have $1 billion.
No, she was born on a hog farm in Mississippi and raised during the first 6 years by her grandmother and grandfather on that hog farm. And the message of that is pretty much the same message as the John Coltrane book, that the seed of who you are to become is already in you. And the book focuses on how she got her start speaking in church.
God had shone a light on her. And you've got that partnership with her. It's like she could feel that force in her.
Right, and there's kind of a call and the book is written kind of in a call and response manner, and God had shown that light on her. That's kind of like an old, if you can imagine an old woman in church who's kind of sitting back gossiping, fanning herself, and commenting on everything. So that's the
beautiful image. That's great. Okay, now you've got 2 books here that center on the Obama family. The first one is First Pooch, the Obamas Pick a Pet. You told me this is your most popular.
It's popular right now, and it's also one of my favorite books because I am a dog lover and had been wanting to write a dog book for years. I had a couple other dog manuscripts that had been turned down. And when I heard that the Obamas were getting a pet, I said, I am writing about that dog.
Now, did you contact them at all, or
no,
did you do it all?
And they haven't contacted me either.
Well, that needs to change.
Yeah.
That so needs to change. Well, and I thought it was really cool that you talked about all the different presidents and the decisions that they have to make, and then the decision that he made that they got to have a puppy.
Right, right. I could relate to wanting a puppy because I could remember how I felt when I was a young girl and had to beg and beg and beg and.
Yes. So many children come into the library to get the book about the puppy that they're trying to talk their parents into getting.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you've got to do your research.
And then Mr. Obama, Only in America.
And that's a poetic biography of the president. It's really a tribute to him. And I was even able to get a poem that I wrote to celebrate the inauguration
Oh, wow.
in the back of the book. So there's
Oh, cool.
the poem that's his biography. The text is really his biography, but then American Baptism is the poem.
Will you close us out
Sure.
by reading that? That would be great.
American Baptism. An ancestral spring rises in us as we scale a mountain to cast this vote. A stream dammed up beyond possibility, now liquid and electric in our veins. A river of tears greets the news that's been generations coming, and we wonder, is this like Jubilee? The movement cradled by a dream is now a wave. We are surfing toward the horizon when the tide of tomorrow carries millions more like us. Multitudes cresting in a sea of hope and humanity, a second coming to a hallowed shore. As Lincoln overlooks the reflecting pool, we know that we stand on promises. Ghost wade into the Mississippi. Surely America has been baptized.
Wow. All right, I told you I really want to ask you about the power of poetry and why you choose to write this way for children. What do you think poems give children that just a regular narrative would not?
Well, I think that poetry distills not only the language but also the emotion. So it hits us. It hits its target more directly. And I like to say that poetry sings to the soul.
Yes.
So that's that's really why other than the fact that I like poetry myself, and I consider poetry my first literary language. That's why I write in poetry, because I want the subject matter to be powerful. I want the language to be powerful, and I don't want it to miss its mark at all.
Yeah. Well, your books, I think, give poetry a good name. And, because a lot of children, you say poem, unless it rhymes, a birdie with the yellow bill sat upon my windowsill, they don't really get what a poem is.
Right.
And I think that now they can see and hear these, and they've heard you read today, and they can really get how that reaches into you just in a whole different place than just your head.
Right. Poetry is so musical. So it aims for the same region of the brain, I think, that that music does. It really should be read aloud.
Yes.
I mean, it's fine for a child to sit down and read the book to himself or herself, but read it aloud.
Yeah, yeah. Hear that song, get to know their own song. Thank you so much for coming and being with us today.
Thank you, Barb, and keep poetry alive.
It's just been a privilege, absolutely, and your books are just amazing. Well, there it is, and we did not get to the Beatitudes, which is like sort of a march through African American history, done beautifully and poetically, gorgeous illustrations, so that's another one. But you can see the spirit of her, the poetry of her, the love of history. She's giving our children roots and wings. There's something for everybody. So as always, thank you for joining us, and come see us at the library.